So Arks of Omen is a really interesting season, and I've been learning a lot, and I've been trying to do videos around how to get the best out of Blood Angels, or to use units that you've not been using before to make a really decent competitive list. So today we're going to continue that trend. This is going to be a survival guide, using some of the units that you probably have, just that they haven't seen the tabletop for ages, and how you can get the best out of them in this Arks of Omen season. Okay, so let's get right into surviving the Arks of Omen season. And the first thing I want to talk about is our Librarian with the jump pack. We've talked a ton about this character in the past. I think he's back. I think you want to run Firstborn for 80 points. You may give him the jump pack for 25. You give him Chief Librarian for 20. That comes in at 125 points. How you want to equip him 100% is Psychic Fortress. Psychic Fortress basically gives you that 5-up invulnerable in an aura. For all chapter units within 6, so it doesn't care about core or any of that nonsense. So this will help any vehicles that you're running. Redemptor Dreadnoughts are going to get huge benefit out of this, and even units like Sangre Guard or Death Company, who really suffer from lack of invuln this season because of the removal of armor contempt. This guy could realistically run with them and provide a ton of value. And the flip side of that is you can also take Null Zone, which means you can turn off invulnerable saves. Now, Null Zone is a very difficult power to use correctly, because obviously it's a 6-inch aura, so at that point, any of your units that have an invulnerable save, then you need to be away from them. But used right, Null Zone can decimate enemies that have like really good invuns. I've used it in events before, and it can be so powerful. By becoming the Psychic Chief Librarian, you actually can get one more power. Now, there's loads of powers that they could pick here from the... And we're looking at the Librarius discipline here. You could take Veil of Time to help you get some reroll charges. You'd also take Might of Heroes, which synergizes really well if you've got Dreadnoughts in your list. And the last thing is you really want to take the Warlord trait on this Librarian to give him +1 to cast. If you're playing this in tournaments, trust me, casting on a 6 sucks. That's one of the main reasons that Mephiston is a bad character, because he has no innate +1 to cast, which you should have, really, in my opinion. Or what I would actually like to see is the ability for the named characters to take these Warlord traits that make sense, like Mephiston would make a lot more sense to be able to take this Warlord trait. But anyway, yeah, so you want to take the +1 to cast. It will give your Psychic Fortress cast on a 5. That is pretty reliable. It will give Null Zone on a 6, which isn't super reliable, but it's decent. All the other powers are 6s in the Librarius discipline, so you'll get them on 5s. But the interesting thing to remember is you can advance and cast, which means, bearing in mind you always advance at least 2 inches with Blood Angels. Having the jump pack gives you 12 inches, so that's 14. So with the Null Zone cast, and then the 14 inches of movement, you can basically take the invulnerable saves off a unit 20 inches away. This can be very good. When I used to run this, and I used to run it a lot, before Armor of Contempt, turn 1 and 2 I usually stayed with my units in Psychic Fortress, and then turn 3 I probably jump off and try Null Zone, and at that point become a bit of a sacrificial character, because the second you turn on Null Zone, this character is going to die, right? He's toughness 4 with 4 wounds, and he's got 3-up save, so you will die very quickly when you turn on Null Zone. But I guess the idea is to turn on Null Zone onto something that's going to be much more valuable than him, and then take it out with a ton of Sangre Guard attacks, with, you know, because Sangre Guard swords or power fists are going to be -4 by turn 3, and or equivalent units, right? So this guy, I think, is going to be pretty important to Blood Angels, unless, of course, you're running a lot of Storm Shields. And we have seen some people transition towards more Storm Shields, but if you don't want to run Storm Shields, if you want to keep running all jump units, mainly Sangre Guard, mainly Death Company, I think this Librarian is going to be worth his weight in gold. I think he's going to be very important. Alright, what have we got next? Next, I'm going to talk to you about Deep Strike charges. And with everything being in reserve now, like, I say everything, people can put like up to 1,000 points of their models in a 2,000 point game, or 999 points to be precise, into strategic reserve, and it doesn't cost any CP to do that. Shooting armies have a bit of an advantage here, because they're coming in and they can always just shoot, right? They don't need to make a charge like we do. And we know the 8-inch charges, even with a reroll, are unreliable. It's a 66% chance. Now, if you have Canticle of Hate, or another way to get +2 to charge, and there is only one other way you can do this, and I believe it's by including Rebute Guilliman in your list. So if you have Rebute Guilliman, or you have Canticle of Hate, and today we're talking about the Chaplain with Canticle of Hate, you can get +2 to your charge. Now, I would recommend, if you're going to do this, if you just bring them down, you're going to want to cast Commanding Oratory, right? So like the Chaplain arrives in Deep Strike with some other units. Probably the Chaplain has Icon of the Angel, which basically means all Blood Angels. Again, doesn't care about core, which is good. I guess if you wanted to charge with something that isn't core, let's say a Terrax Siege Drill or something. So you'd be rerolling all your charges, you'd pay your 2 CP for Commanding Oratory, and then you're charging on a 7. A 7-inch charge with a reroll is 83%, so it's 17% and change better than your 8-inch charge. And both these times, you remember, we're still making a 9-inch charge. We're just getting +1 from Red Thirst, or we're getting +2 from Canticle of Hate. And that's why I always say you make the 8-inch charge with the Red Thirst, or you make the 7-inch charge with Canticle of Hate. So with the rerolls, it becomes quite a bit more reliable. So I think if we're seeing a shift towards people bringing Terminators or other strong survivable units in Deep Strike. I think if you're going to do that, you're going to get a lot of value out of Canticle of Hate. Like if you've got 2 units and you've got an 83% chance of charging, I feel like you've got a high probability of maybe getting 2 in. If you've got 2 units and you've got 66% chance of charging, I just feel like one of them is going to fail. And that doesn't always happen, but I do think that Icon of the Angel, Canticle of Hate, and remember, if you put this on a jump pack Chaplain, there's also the trick where you can make him the Master of Sanctity, which basically means he knows an additional litany. With the Master of Sanctity, you can take the Wise Orator trait, which means normally is in litanies cast on 2s rather than 3s. And then it does mean if you use Commanding Oratory, you only spend the 1 command point to do so. So we could arrive with a unit, maybe the Chaplain's like 6 inches away from them, hiding. So that unit will then make its charge in turn 2 or turn 3. And then the Chaplain could jump off, again, advance. And then you could either try and risk the cast on a 2, or you could pay 1 CP to use Commanding Oratory a second time, because Commanding Oratory is 1 CP cheaper if you have the Wise Orator trait. So you could basically do 2 7-inch charges with rerolls, Canticle of Hate, and all in all this would cost you 4 CP, which isn't too bad. You know, 1 CP for the Warlord trait, 1 CP each turn to guarantee this +2, and then 1 CP for Icon of the Angels. And bear in mind, if you are charging with units on the board as well, they will benefit this dependent on where you position your Chaplain. If your Chaplain also gets involved in the fray, then this is pretty cool. You can actually move an additional 3 inches when you pile in and consolidate, which actually can be huge. You can get an extra 6 inches of movement there. So maybe if you had a big squad, guys at the back of the engagement that normally might have not made it in, can make it in. So I think if you are going to be relying on Deep Strike charges, take it from me, 8-inch charges, even with a reroll, or a 9-inch charge with +1 from Red Thirst, which requires you to roll an 8, is shit. It's not reliable at all. 7 is a little bit better. I think it's worth, if that's part of your main tactic, for this season, then definitely consider this. Or, I mean, I guess you could consider Guilliman because he gives +1 within 12 inches to charges, so you can stack that with Red Thirst as well. Yeah, so Chaplain with Canticle of Hate and Icon of the Angel, and some sort of combination of Wise Orator. If you Deep Strike with both units in the same turn, then maybe you don't need the Warlord trait. You would just use Commanding Oratory once and it costs the same 4 CP. Something like that. I do think that if you are going to use Commanding Oratory more than once, you should probably just take the Warlord trait, and then that gives you your other litanies additional reliability. It is important to note, if you use Commanding Oratory, you can use it in any of your phases, so you don't have to use it in your command phase, but you cannot recite any other litanies. Whereas if you've used the Wise Orator, then you can recite 2 litanies, and you can recite them on 2s, and 2 litanies on 2 pluses is usually pretty reliable. Again, that means each litany has an 83% chance, and that's a good way of looking at it. Like, if a charge with a reroll on a 7 is an 83% chance, then that's the same as rolling a d6 and not getting a 1. So use that as a ballpark figure for this. Okay, next up. Someone left me this comment, and I love this idea, and it's one that I hadn't really thought of, and I wanted to explain it to you. So he said he's going to take a buffing Primaris Chaplain on a bike. If we wind the game back like a year's time, everyone was running Chaplains on the bike. Everyone was running Chaplains on the bike with, like, for an Angel Sacrifice character, right? They would have, like, typically Mantle of... Adamantium Mantle to give them a 5-up Feel No Pain, and Armor Indomitus to give them a 2-up and a 3-up Invulnerable Save. And the Chaplain on the bike, I believe, has 7 wounds, so this would make him 8 wounds, 2-up Save, 3-up Invulnerable once per game, and a 5-up Feel No Pain, and you just sacrifice him in every combat. He's got a big base, so you can get multiple units in engagement, and force them to attack him. It's pretty cool, right? However, this is a cool idea as well. And I mean, you could probably still use that one, but this is a cool idea that I wanted to share with you. So, Vox ESPIRITUM is a warlord trait, relic, sorry, that nobody uses. I don't think I've seen many Blood Angels players use it. Usually if I'd seen a Blood Angels player pick it, I would be like, why have you picked that? It's useless. So he's picked that. So basically he adds 3 inches to the range of all bearers' aura abilities. He can only be used on a Primaris model, so it kind of has to be a Primaris Chaplain, and because Primaris Chaplains cannot take jump packs, then we're kind of limited. You could put it on one without, but I think you want it on a Primaris Chaplain on a bike, right? So it makes all of his auras 9 inches. So his first aura is Soul Warden, so that gives you basically an 18-inch diameter, bubble of 5-up against mortal wounds. Soul Warden is a great power. I mean, it's decent in 6, adding 3 inches to it. Remember that biker does have a big base. It's not like he's on a 40mm base. He's almost on 2 40s together. So you're creating like a pretty big pizza at this point, if you think about it, like a 20-inch diameter bubble almost. With this chaplain in the middle, so you could possibly, I think you can probably get most of your army into this. So most of your army could just get, you get 5-up army wide from Soul Warden. We've talked before about how Soul Warden is a great power. You can also extend the aura of his leadership. So basically your whole army is also leadership 9. And in some ways, this is better than, like, a few people take Heroic Bearing for Dante, right, which is +1 leadership. Well, +1 leadership on like a unit of Death Company is still leadership 8. So in some ways, the Chaplain doing this is actually better. And that's a built-in ability for the Chaplain. The Chaplain doesn't need to do anything for that. He just now has a bubble of everything within 9 inches can use his leadership of 9. Cool. Obviously, we can just cast Canticle of Hate. We just talked about that. Canticle of Hate is an aura. So basically, +2 inches to charge for everything within 9. Again, that's huge. Bear in mind the fact that this guy's on a bike, so if he advances, he moves a minimum of 20 inches. So it'll be very easy to position him where you need him to be to keep a lot of your army in his bubble of like Soul Warden / leadership, and have these deep strikers come down or strategic reserves and get their bonus to charge. Litany of Hate is another aura, and I guess at this point you'd probably want to maybe use Commanding Oratory in one of the auras, but you could definitely make this guy the Master of Sanctity, and if you paid the extra points for the Master of Sanctity, then he's casting 2 litanies, and one of the litanies could be your Litany of Hate. Litany of Hate is also very good for core and characters within 6, well it is within 9 now. Get to reroll all their melee attacks. It's not just reroll ones, like Guilliman, it is reroll all. So this character, I guess, for like 150 points, if you make him the Master of Sanctity, is going to give you 9-inch Soul Warden, 9-inch Leadership 9, 9-inch Canticle of Hate, or 9-inch Litany of Hate, or both if you want to risk the 3+ to cast. I like this a lot. In some ways, this is actually better than Guilliman. So it's the person who put this comment, thank you so much for that. They said it was similar to Guilliman, but for less points and more CP. So I guess it would cost you 1 CP to take Soul Warden. And I guess, yes, it is, so it is more CP just, and 1 CP for Vox ESPIRITUM. So you're spending 2 CP, but for 150 points, you're getting a giant 9-inch bubble, or 18-inch in diameter, which is even more based on the bike captains. that guy's on an Outrider base, which I think is at least 80 millimeters long. 80 millimeters is about 3 inches. So you're almost like, you're at least like 20, maybe 21 inches in diameter bubble, based on the way you've got your bike captain set. It's not an exact circle, right? Because the bike captain's base isn't a circle. But you're getting a giant bubble of Feel No Pain, Leadership 9, potentially +2 to charge, or potentially reroll all hits from coring characters. That is very powerful for 150 points. The Chaplain, I guess, in combat, he's got a 2 damage mace. He's got a couple of bolters on his guns, but that's not why he's here. They could do some work, for sure, right? Like, I think he's on like 4 or 5 attacks, so he could do 10 damage in combat. He could do a couple of wounds off in shooting, but the potential that he has of buffing is huge. And in the game that I played, Gilliman, who is very similar buffs, in that, like, well, he has the +1 to charges and the reroll ones for combat, but it does also include non-core, so it's just like half this. It was very decent. Like, it felt very decent. So I think if you're looking for someone to just buff melee and add survivability and add leadership, then the Primaris Chaplain on a bike is amazing. I forgot to write down who sent this comment, but thank you so much for that. I looked at this and was just kind of blown away. I was like, wow, we haven't seen anyone running this. This is a cool idea. I like it a lot. Thanks for sharing. Alright, if you are getting any value out of today's video, please remember to hit the like button. It takes like 2 seconds. And it really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. You could also subscribe if you've not subscribed before, and if you are already subscribed, we do have a little bell. You find the little bell next to the subscribe button. If you click the bell, you set notifications to all. That means you'll always be alerted when I put a new content or a new video out, and I do really appreciate that. So thank you. We are closing in on 12,000 subscribers, so it would be really nice to get there. Next up, Baal Predators. So I've ran a couple of Baal Predators now, and I think this is what I want to say to people. Some people have been frustrated with the season. Some people have been frustrated with other seasons in 9th edition. And I think the one thing that I always try and say is just, when you're making your models or you're buying your models, don't always chase the meta. You can chase the meta a bit if you want to. I mean, I'm a competitive player. I like to buy competitive units. But there is value in just painting units that you enjoy to paint, or collecting units that you enjoy to collect. Because at some point in the future, they will be viable. I didn't think ever I would be fielding Baal Predators and thinking, wow, that's actually a decent choice. And probably the same goes for the Gladiator Reapers, and let's talk about both of them, because I think both of them are okay choices now. The Baal Predator went down to 100 points, or 110 points, sorry, and it's toughness 7, 11 wounds. It's never gonna, it's not gonna, you know, it's not survivable, really. But what's it got? It's got a twin assault cannon, it's got 2 heavy bolters, it's got storm bolter, and it's got a hunter killer missile. So if you put all that together, that's a maximum of 28 wounds per turn. I wouldn't expect it to do even half of those, but at 110 points, you could run 2 or 3 of these now pretty easily. You know, 2 of them is the equivalent, is only 35 points more than a Redemptor Dreadnought. If we look at a Redemptor Dreadnought, if we pick, let's say, both onslaught cannons, so we get the maximum number of shots, the maximum amount of damage a Redemptor Dreadnought can do for 185 points is 34. I guess the Redemptor Dreadnought has some advantages in that it has a melee weapon and it also has core. But, you know, if you've got 2 Baal Predators doing potentially 56 damage in shooting, and you've got 1 Redemptor Dreadnought 35 points cheaper only doing 34, then the Baal Predator actually doesn't look too bad at all, right? The Gladiator Reaper, I guess, could be used here as well. It would do similar. For 150 points, it's doing 50 damage, potentially. That would be if you're within half range and you're getting the extra shots from the Tempest Bolters, etc. So the Gladiator Reaper seems like an okay choice as well. I think my issue with these, and I saw it recently in the tournament I went to, no invulnerable save hurts Marines terrible. And this goes back to point 1 why I was saying you should take a Psychic Fortress Librarian. If you don't have an invulnerable save, it doesn't matter if you've got like Redemptors or 13 wounds, toughness 7, -1 damage. The Baal Predator is toughness 7, 11 wounds. The Reaper is toughness 8, 12 wounds. I don't think it matters. You can die in a single round of combat very, very quickly, or a single round of shooting. Like a single attack bike, a 50-point attack bike will arguably kill all of these now, because if they hit and wound, then you get no save. And they could spike double 6 on their damage roll, and then that's you pretty much dead. Or if you're not dead, you're on 1 wound and you're shooting back on 5s or something, you're doing nothing. So Space Marine armor has a huge weakness in the fact that there's no invulnerable saves there. So I feel like the Baal Predator for me is the best choice, because it's cheap, 110 points. I don't really care about it. It's just there to eat up some firepower I maybe don't want going somewhere else. And if it's left unchecked, well, I mean, if it's left unchecked and I spike some stuff, you're talking 20 wounds of damage. So the enemy has to kill it, right? They can't just leave it. They can't leave a 20-point... They can't leave a tank that can do 20 points a turn. But at the same time, if they're shooting that tank, I take that as a win, you know? I've been playing a few games where I've been running an Impulsor now, and an Impulsor's 100 points. And sometimes if they spend their whole shooting phase shooting my single Impulsor to try and get to, like, the Blade Guard veteran side, even if they kill it in turn 1 or something, I might take that as a win. I'm like, if all I lost in turn 1 was my 100-point Impulsor, I'm good. You know, like, I didn't really lose anything. Yes, I lost a bit of mobility on my Blade Guard, but I can live with that, you know? And I think the Baal Predator is the same for me. Like, if I lose a 110-point Baal Predator in turn 1, don't really care. I mean, someone's got to die in turn 1, right? If I lose a 185-point Redemptor in turn 1, because I had that happen to me in the tournament, I deployed it in cover, Raven Wing moved on top of me because they're so darn fast and they multi-melted it. And when you lose a 185-point Redemptor in turn 1, you're going, you know, that's quite a lot to lose, like, right? It feels like a lot to lose. Whereas 110 points, you're going to lose something. And I know there's only 75 points between those two things, but I think it's just perspective. I think it, you know, so that's where I am. I'm running 2 Baal Predators. If I had a third one, I might feel the third one. I mean... I could run 2 Baal Predators and a Reaper, but I just think that the Baal Predator being the cheap option. I think cheap is the way to go here. So yeah, that's number 4. And I guess you could smokescreen these things. The Gladiator Reaper and the Baal Predator have the smokescreen. The Redemptor Dreadnought does not. Another big weakness with the Redemptor, I guess, lack of smokescreen. Okay, and then the Infiltrator meta, that is returning. So, Infiltrators dropped in points. So, they dropped 20 points, which is... I guess it was like a 15% drop. But the Helix Gauntlet arguably makes it almost like a 20% drop in points. Because Helix Gauntlet being free, everyone's going to take the Helix Gauntlet. It's definitely the... Well, I mean, you can't really not take the Helix Gauntlet, right? So, you take the Helix Gauntlet. It's free. The first time that squad takes damage, you can just ignore it. There's also 2 more strats you can play on these guys, Smokescreen and Transhuman. So if you desperately need these Infiltrators to survive on an objective, to hold it for, like, winning the game on Primaris or something, there's ways you can make that happen. If you Smokescreen them -1 to hit, and then Transhuman only winning on 4s, that adds a ton of survivability. And obviously you've got the Helix Gauntlet there as well to ignore the first one. I also think with Demons being more prevalent in the meta now, and their ability to deep strike within sort of lower ranges than 9. The 12-inch deep strike denial from the Omni Scramblers is going to be huge. 2 units of Infiltrators can almost screen half the board. That's 2 circles of minimum, and I say minimum, 24 inches in diameter, because you can daisy chain that whole unit out. So you can daisy chain that unit out, have a guy, 2 inches, a guy, 2 inches, a guy, 2 inches. If you add all that up, all those bases are like 32s, right? So 32s is like 1.5 inches. So basically 5 times 1.5 inches, that's 7.5, plus then the 12-inch bubble. You can screen out a huge amount of the board. Like almost your whole half can be screened by 2 units of Infiltrators. There's maybe only small areas that they could sneak into. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of Marine players, Blood Angels or not, run 2 units of Infiltrators. I think they're the best choice. Combined with the fact that you can sticky objectives now, in that if you start on an objective, you sticky it, you move off, your Infiltrators can hide in cover and be even more of a nuisance. I like them a lot. I'm going to be running 2 in my tournament list. And yeah, it's kind of gone full circle, right? Like there was a period where Infiltrators were best, then it was Incursors, then we had Incursors and Assault Intercessors, we even had some regular Intercessors. So it's been an interesting addition for troops. We've kind of gone full circle, but we're back to, I think, Infiltrators, 100%. They will be the meta, and I'd be surprised. And in some ways, this is going to limit Blood Angels as well, because if every other Marine player is running Infiltrators, then it's going to be very difficult to make deep strikes effective. So maybe that like lowers the effectiveness of Terminators in this meta. We'll really have to see. Okay, so in summary, I've been saying for a few weeks now, it's a good time for experimentation. And there's a few things I would have never predicted that were good for Blood Angels, and that would be like Rebooty Guilliman. He works really nice in a Blood Angels attachment now. Stormraven gunships, we talked about them last week, how you can do an alpha strike. You can arrive on the board before they've shot you, shoot all your weapons, and then charge. I did make a small mistake in last week's video, and somebody asked what the mistake would be, in that I said that the plasma cannons got 8 shots on average to get 4. So if you were trying to kill a Gladiator Reaper for like Iron Hands, you would no longer kill it, you'd only do like 12 damage to it. I think it was 11.3 damage actually, so you'd leave it on like 1 wound. So the Stormraven maybe is a little bit weaker than I said in last week's video, but it's still good. If you didn't watch last week's video, please check it out. And now we talked about the Baal Predators. I'm sure there's some other interesting options that I haven't covered yet. Someone mentioned to me ATVs with Guilliman, and I guess the big weakness of ATVs before was that they weren't core, so you can never get rerolls. Well, ATVs, if you can reroll ones, it's kind of the same thing as being core. So there could be an ATV meta emerging as well. I've never owned ATVs, but that is what it is. So, like I said, this is the time to paint models, enjoy, take inspiration from army lists being shared, and if you want to submit your list to me, you can do that. At the moment, it seems like there's almost a new 10th edition rumour daily. So I think we have to use this time wisely to prepare for the future, finish up your backlog, get ready, try some stuff out. I have a GT in around 3 weeks' time, so I'll let you know my final list for that. And leave me a comment, was there something that's standing out to you in Arks of Omen that I haven't listed in the last few weeks? Because if not, if anyone's got any other cool ideas like that Primaris Chaplain idea, I'd love to hear about it. Alright, brothers. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you on the next one. By the blood are we made strong. Peace.